In this episode of the Encounter Report, 4 heroes transgressed with finesse in Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age. There's Axelrod, your humble narrator, Crayson, our marathon runner, Ghost VTS, our difficulty diplomat, and Al Bells. Each of us played the game blind on the PlayStation 4 with the exception of Al Bells, who played the re-release on the PlayStation 5. Everything is up until the credits, so no post-game or post-credits content is included. And now that we're all pepped up, let's use that pep power. Battle types are up first, and we have some curious numbers sprinkled around. Al Bells has the least amount of time spent in random encounters, but Ghost VTS has the least amount of random encounters. Meanwhile, Crayson and myself's random encounter times are very close together, but he has well over 100 more encounters than I do. Even with bosses, Ghost VTS and myself have fairly close times, but Al Bells has the highest and Crayson spent the least amount of time in it. In fact, Al Bells is the only person who has random encounter times and boss times in the same ballpark. Dragon Quest XI has over 25 bosses, so it's interesting that he was the only person to line up like that. Moving on to battle locations, we can see what the spread of encounters was across general areas. For Dragon Quest XI, indoor areas alongside forests were what I considered dungeons, while most outdoor areas were world map locations. Here we can see that the spread of encounters between those two locations isn't so large, but the times can certainly vary depending on where the deaths occurred. On the side of Al Bells' town encounters, he actually engaged in some of the optional events of the game as well as new content, which resulted in additional time and encounters that were exclusive to his version. For combat types, we get to see how each encounter concluded, and our death numbers really seemed to be the most powerful indicator of where everybody stood. Every single one of us got annihilated by Tatsunaga at least once, as he was the most challenging boss for everyone. Then again, Ghost VTS had 4 deaths against the same boss, and that was primarily due to him fighting it as one of the first bosses instead of one of the last. Al Bells' deaths were sprinkled about various bosses and other encounter types, but were easily shrugged off. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the elephant in the room, in that our marathon runner Crayson only ran from 2 encounters. Is this the off-season or something? With subtypes, we can check out some of the extra stuff that was being done. Most notably is the grinding numbers, which everyone had at least a taste of while Crayson had a feast. The vast majority of Ghost VTS and Al Bells' grinding was to acquire Pep to complete a side quest, which Crayson also engaged in. However, Crayson took it upon himself to grind right before visiting the top of Yggdrasil. Prior to the grinding, Hero was level 32 and the highest level in the party. By the end, he was level 36 and used that momentum to steamroll the rest of the game. We have party composition to follow that up, and this is where I probably look back and say this was a mistake, because I'm fitting all 8 characters. If you don't have a microscope by now, you're missing out. I've also added a faint highlight to the characters each person had in their party for easier comparison. This time around, we had some interesting quirks with composition that is not typically seen. Joining Jade, I had Hero, Rab, and Hendrik in my final party. For Crayson, it was Hero, Hendrik, and Serena, while Ghost VTS had Hero, Hendrik, and Serena as well. For Al Bells, he had Serena, Hendrik, and Sylvando. That's right, he kicked out Hero. What a bold move. We've also got the level progression graph for each person. On the left, we have the levels, and on the bottom, many of the bosses in the game. Each boss takes up a rectangle in the graph, and within those rectangles, we have Hero's levels for when the boss was defeated. Here we can see that for all bosses starting at Tricky Devil up to the Headless Honcho, our level range is fairly close. Crayson manages to veer off from the pack largely due to him engaging in a lot of encounters in the early portion of the game. As an example, Crayson was at encounter 201 when reaching the Slayer of the Sands, while I was at encounter 100, Ghost VTS at 122, and Al Bells at 147. By the time everyone had defeated the Headless Honcho, Crayson was at encounter 476, while I was at 312, Ghost VTS at 286, and Al Bells at 352. On top of that, each of us got to kill some metal slimes along the way. Al Bells killed 9 in total, Ghost VTS killed 3, one of which was a King Metal Slime. Crayson also killed 9 alongside an additional 2 Hardy Hands, and myself at 3, which were all prior to the Dora in Grey fight. We're making a quick pit stop over to view the numbers of enemies per encounter in its microscopic habitat. This is one of the rare times where we get to see more than 5 enemies in an encounter, and we went up to 7 for Crayson, which is crazy in of itself. We're also briefly going to check out the chapter delineation. Chapter 1 leads up until the events of Yggdrasil, and Chapter 2 is when you wake up as a fish, and the intermission occurring between those 2 points, which is exclusive to the re-release version of the game that Albel's played. And to close everything out, here are the final combined stats. After all of that, it turns out everyone ended up in a pretty similar spot with encounter time except for me, but I also predominantly only fought new monsters and skipped everything else. That said, I think it's a testament to how each of our playstyles interacted with this game. I was much more defensive than everyone else and placed a lot of emphasis on buffs and debuffs. Grayson was focused on brute force and scaled his party high enough so that he can crush everything while cycling in characters to shore up weaknesses or improve his damage output. Ghost VTS had a very balanced approach, which typically revolved around Jade and Hendrik dealing the bulk of the damage and everyone else supporting that effort. Albel's, on the other hand, went with the riskiest of the builds and compositions and put everything on Sylvando's shoulders. After a while, Serena was swapped in to help with the glass cannon nature of his team, which ended up making it very difficult to kill with the amount of healing output available. Albel's was also the only person to delve deep into crafting, reforging equipment to +2 and +3 at every chance he got. And that's the Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age encounter report. I hope you visit everyone's channels and social media to praise them for all this wonderful data. With another report done, we can go back to Sylvando's troop and bring back some smiles to the world. Thanks for watching, appreciate it, see you on the next video.